On a limestone hill in southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa, stands one of the most important archaeological sites ever discovered, Göbekli Tepe, meaning Potbelly Hill in Turkish. At first glance, it does not look like a place that could change history. It is a rounded mound rising above the plains of Upper Mesopotamia, a region once called Al-Jazira. But beneath that hill are circles of massive carved stone pillars, some among the oldest known megaliths in the world. They were built around 9,500 BCE, thousands of years before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, and before writing. Göbekli Tepe matters because it forces a difficult question: what were human communities capable of before cities, kings, pottery, and written records existed? The site belongs to the pre-pottery Neolithic, a period when communities in Southwest Asia were beginning to live in more permanent settlements but had not yet developed pottery in the familiar sense. This era is tied to what archaeologists call the Neolithic Revolution, the long transition from mobile hunting and gathering toward farming, herding, and settled village life. For a long time, the basic story seemed straightforward. Agriculture produced surplus food supported larger communities, and larger communities eventually built monuments. Göbekli Tepe complicated that sequence. Its monumental architecture appeared so early that it suggested organized construction, symbolic life, and large-scale cooperation may have emerged before fully established farming. Instead of being a simple result of agriculture, monumental building may have been part of the process that encouraged people to settle down. The most famous features of Göbekli Tepe are its large circular or oval enclosures. Inside them stand T-shaped limestone pillars, many arranged around the perimeter, with two larger pillars often placed near the center. These stones are not random boulders. They were quarried, shaped, transported, and set upright with planning and coordination. Some pillars reach several meters in height and weigh many tons. The T-shape is especially striking because many researchers interpret it as a stylized human form. On some pillars, carved arms, hands, belts, and clothing-like details appear on the stone surface. This suggests that the pillars were not only structural supports. They may have represented beings, ancestors, spirits, or powerful figures in a symbolic world we can only partially reconstruct. What makes these pillars even more remarkable is their imagery. Many are decorated with relief carvings of wild animals, snakes, foxes, boars, birds, and other creatures from the surrounding landscape. These were not domesticated farm animals, and that matters. The carvings reflect a world still deeply connected to wild nature, hunting, danger, and observation of animal behavior. The animals are not merely decorative, they may have carried mythological or ritual significance. Some appear dynamic or threatening, as if the builders wanted to represent forces beyond ordinary human control. Because there are no written explanations from the people who created Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists must interpret the imagery carefully. The carvings provide rare evidence of prehistoric iconography, but their exact meanings remain uncertain. For years, Göbekli Tepe was popularly described as the world's first temple. That phrase captured public imagination because the site seemed to be a sanctuary built by people who were not yet farmers and did not live there permanently. Under this older interpretation, mobile hunter-gatherer groups may have gathered on the hill for ceremonies, feasts, or rituals, building the enclosures as sacred spaces rather than houses. The absence of obvious early domestic evidence seemed to support this idea. If true, it would mean spiritual or ceremonial needs helped bring scattered groups together, perhaps even pushing them toward more settled life. But archaeology changes as more evidence is uncovered, and the picture at Göbekli Tepe has become more complex than a simple temple story. Recent findings point toward Göbekli Tepe not just as an isolated ritual center, but as a settlement with daily life. Archaeologists have identified domestic structures, smaller buildings, tools, and evidence connected to extensive cereal processing. There were also stone-cut cisterns and signs of water management, which would have been essential for people spending significant time on a rocky hilltop. These discoveries do not erase the special character of the monumental enclosures, but they do change the context. The builders were not necessarily visitors arriving only for occasional ceremonies. They may have lived nearby or on the mound itself, grinding grain, maintaining structures, and organizing work over generations. Göbekli Tepe now looks less like a lonely temple and more like a complex community landscape. The architecture also shows that the site was not static. The large enclosures appear to have been roofed, at least in some phases, which would make them buildings rather than open-air stone circles in the simplest sense. They also seem to have suffered collapses, landslides, and episodes of inundation. Instead of abandoning them immediately, people repaired, rebuilt, or replaced structures over time. This repeated construction suggests long-term attachment to the place. The mound itself, or tell, rose to about 15 meters high and covers roughly 8 hectares, or about 20 acres. It accumulated through centuries of building, filling, rebuilding, and occupation. Göbekli Tepe is therefore not one monument from one moment, but a layered record of changing activity across more than a millennium. The question of food remains central. The site dates to a time when wild cereals were abundant in parts of the region and when human groups were experimenting with new ways of using plants. Evidence of cereal processing at Göbekli Tepe shows that grain played an important role, whether gathered from wild stands or cultivated in early forms. This is why the site sits at the heart of debates about agriculture. Did farming allow communities to organize labor for monumental projects? Or did gatherings, rituals, feasts, and social obligations create pressure for more reliable food supplies, encouraging cultivation? The answer may not be either-or. Göbekli Tepe suggests that belief, cooperation, food production, and settlement may have developed together, each reinforcing the others. Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Nearby sites, including Karahan Tepe, share architectural and symbolic similarities. This matters because it means Göbekli Tepe was part of a wider Neolithic world rather than a completely isolated miracle. Communities across the region were experimenting with large stone architecture, carved imagery, and new forms of social organization. Seeing Göbekli Tepe in this broader network helps archaeologists avoid treating it as an anomaly with no context. It also shows that early monumental building may have been more widespread than once thought. The people of Upper Mesopotamia were not simply waiting for civilization to begin. They were actively creating new spaces, symbols, and traditions long before the rise of cities in later Mesopotamia. The modern discovery of Göbekli Tepe unfolded gradually. The site was first noted during an archaeological survey in 1963, but its importance was not fully recognized at the time. That changed in 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt visited the mound and understood that the stones visible on the surface were not ordinary medieval remains or natural features. Excavations began the following year, revealing the monumental enclosures that made the site famous. Schmidt's interpretation of Göbekli Tepe as a major ritual center shaped early public understanding. After his death in 2014, research continued as a joint project involving Istanbul University, the Şanlıurfa Museum, and the German Archaeological Institute, with Turkish prehistorian Nikmi Carol among the leading figures in ongoing work. Despite decades of attention, most of Göbekli Tepe remains unexcavated. As of 2021, only around 10% of the site had been excavated. Geophysical surveys, which allow researchers to examine what lies beneath the mound without digging everything up, suggest there are at least 20 large enclosures within the site. This is important for two reasons. First, it means our current understanding is based on only a fraction of the evidence. Second, it shows that the site was even more extensive and organized than the first excavations suggested. Archaeologists must balance discovery with preservation, because excavation is destructive by nature. Once layers are removed, they cannot be put back. Careful research is essential for protecting what remains. In 2018, Göbekli Tepe was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as one of the earliest known manifestations of human-made monumental architecture. Its importance is not that it provides all the answers, but that it changes the questions. It shows that people more than 11,000 years ago could organize labor, shape stone, create powerful images, and maintain meaningful places across generations. It blurs the boundary between hunter-gatherers and settled villagers, between ritual and daily life, between practical survival and symbolic imagination. Göbekli Tepe does not prove a single simple origin story for civilization. Instead, it reveals a more human one, communities gathering, building, remembering, adapting, and slowly transforming the world they lived in. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.